Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is guitar player and educator Alex Windsor. Alex is she's super cool. She's in a bunch of bands. She's like doing a lot to help the music community and women in music. And she's the first guest I've had on that I don't know in person at all. So it was cool getting to learn about her story and hearing how she got where she's at in the music industry. And I think people will dig her story. As always, if you are watching on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the little bell to get updates on future episodes. If you are listening to the podcast version, you can subscribe or give us a review wherever it is you're getting your podcast content. All of that stuff is super appreciated. And we're really starting to see a build in audience here pretty steady. And so all this stuff really helps with that. And, you can find us on social media at Anyway Whatever Podcast, pretty much everywhere. On Twitter, we are at AWP_podcast. And my personal Instagram for my art and design is at Maximum Fluoride. Okay, let's get to it. Alex Windsor, totally awesome guest. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. Today's guest is Alex Windsor. Hi, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here.
Of course. Like I was telling her when we were getting going, she's the first guest I've had on that I really do not know in person and haven't had a lot of interaction with. I kind of found her through through this online Los Angeles magazine. I think it's called LA Voyage magazine.
Yep.
And I had an article on there, and then she had one not too long after, and that's how I found out about you. And then I friended you on Facebook because I knew I wanted to have you be a guest on the show at some point. So I intentionally didn't dig down too deep into what it is that Alex does. I know she does really cool stuff with music and sharing the gift of music with other people. So right up front, just give your social media shout outs and then we'll get going on what it is you do.
Cool. Thank you. So my handles for everything are the same and they're all, boring. But I figured that way it's easiest for people to find me. It's just at Alex Nicole Windsor, and I have Instagram and I have Facebook, and I also, I have everything. All my information is on my website, which is just www.alexnicolewindsor.com. You can find, YouTube, all that stuff is going to be on there. So,
excellent. So I know what I understand is your day gig. You work for Guitar Center. Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I work for the lessons team specifically. And I can give you a little bit of backstory and before I talk about what this role is, I can tell you a little bit about how I got into that role.
Cool.
So I, like many other musicians, I was studying music in college, needed a part-time job to, support my gear habit. So I ended up getting a job at Guitar Center. And this is back when I lived I'm from Chicago originally. And so this is back when I lived in Naperville, and I was working at their Guitar Center, slinging guitars, and I loved it, but I really wanted to get into the educational aspect of it. I was teaching privately, and so I enjoyed that piece of it. And this is still when Guitar Center was just a retail giant, no lessons really whatsoever. Fast forward, they ended up adding lessons to one of their northern Chicago stores, and I ended up taking over and running their lessons program. And while I was there were a lot of problems with how they had everything structured and set up, right? They had a very strict policy on rescheduling and their curriculum updating. And there was just a lot of issues that I noticed right off the bat. And so as the leader of that program, I was like, I'm going to do things my way because I love music and I'm very passionate about it, and I want other people to be passionate about it. And so we needed to have a program that I was able to facilitate that passion through, right? And to help other people feel that way. So I broke a lot of rules, as those of us in punk rock do.
I like it.
Exactly. So we ended up, running a very successful program. It grew very quickly. And I got hit up by one of the vice presidents from Guitar Center. He emailed me and said, hey, I want to, talk to you about your program and stuff. And at the time, I didn't know who I was talking to. I had no idea he was a vice president. He was just some guy who I knew, worked at corporate. And so I was like, okay. So we get on the phone and I was like, I got to be real with you. These things aren't working. I had to do things differently. And he was like, you know what? No, I absolutely agree with you. And then I found out later that he was the vice president of education. And I was like, oh shit, did I just lose my job? Like, I just told him like, hey, I'm not following any of your rules. Well, he had just taken over and he was in total agreement. Like, yeah, we got to change things. So that's when he offered me a job here in California. He said, we would love to have you on the lessons team to kind of help us restructure this program and make it better and make it more fun and more accessible. Do you want to move out here and do this? And I was like, and mind you, okay, this was in December in Chicago. I don't know if you've ever been to Chicago in the winter, but
not
it is
the winter.
Not the winter. No, it's a great time to move to LA. Like the best time to move to LA. So I was like, can I come now? Like, can I pack my shit this weekend and like move out there? Because it had always been a dream of mine. I think every musician secretly dreams of ending up in LA,
sure,
right? So,
sure.
Yeah, so I moved out here and I was just like totally like thrown into this new role, and we were starting to restructure things. And so basically what my job has evolved into is I'm the specialist of educational affairs. And so my primary focus is like rebuilding the curriculum, coming up with new and fun songs to try to get people excited about playing music, and like, looking at how we teach, how do we teach our instructors how to teach. That's like my main focus. But something else that I do is I also do a lot of like the training for store managers. And anytime we open a new store, I fly out and I help them, get set up and get the instructors ready to go. And I love it. It's super fun. It's if you're gonna have like a boring desk job during the day, it's like it's not the worst one that you could have.
Right.
So I love it. I feel very honored to be there. I'm finally now at a point where, because when I first moved out, part of the agreement that they had is they said, look, we will pay for you to move to LA, but you have to work for us for 2 years
sure,
in order to kind of pay that off, which makes sense. They don't want to bring somebody out who's going to bail on them right away. So,
right.
So for the first couple of years, and this was January 2016. So for the first couple of years that I was out here, I didn't really get involved in the music scene at all. I didn't really play in bands. I was just focused on this job because I was like, I can't pay this shit back if I get fired. So I have to fulfill my contract. So fortunately I didn't get fired. So I'm still working there and I still love it. But now I have a lot more freedom and flexibility to get involved in the LA music scene. So that's kind of where I've started to experiment a little bit. So that's my day job. That's what I do. I love it. It's awesome. Not the worst day job to have. If you're gonna do.
Yeah, for sure. It's like anything that you can do that's centered around like your passion in life. I think that that's a gift for any person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stemming from that, you run a program. What's it called?
Gritty and Pink?
Yep, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So,
I'm super interested to hear about this because I looked at what it was a little bit and I was like, this is super cool. And I want her to explain it to me so that I fully understand it.
Yes. So a little bit of backstory on that is I was approached around October of last year. I was approached by Shira Lee from Shiragirl. Mm-hmm. And if you're not familiar with her, she had her own stage on Warped Tour for a long time. She had the shiragirl stage. Mm-hmm. Her passion, she basically like showed up like back, I don't know, it was like 2004, 2005. She tried to get in on the tour and they said, I'm sorry, we're completely full. We don't have any more spaces for your band. So she just went and she got a pink RV, like a hot pink RV, and she just showed up and her band just started playing on the top of the RV. They like turned it into a stage, and they attracted like so many people came over and, wanted to see like, who's this crazy chick in like the tutu who's like, singing and dancing and like, it's all like punk rock. And so Kevin Lyman, who, founded Warped Tour, wonderful dude. He told her, yeah, I'll give you your own stage and we can bring these, female artists in and make sure that they have a space at Warped Tour. So she did that for, probably almost 20 years. That was her main gig. She had, Paramore got their start on her stage. Joan Jett has played her stage. Like all of these artists have, been involved and played on her stage. So anyway, so she hit me up in October and said, hey, we need a bass player. And I was honored. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Cause I was in between bands at the time. And so I started playing bass for her. And then as we were, talking about the future of shiragirl and like what we wanted to do as a band, she kept bringing up something she's like, I want to create a platform called Gritty and Pink. And I want it to be like the original idea was that it would be a residency in LA where, once a month we bring in all of the best female musicians in LA. We have them come in, we have some bands play, we'll feature different, emerging bands, and then we'll have a jam, an all-female jam at the end. And so I was like, yeah, this is like so long overdue, like absolutely. And so from there, and this was probably in December, we really hit the ground running, and she, pulled it together very, very quickly. She was able to, secure a spot at the Satellite, which is was a venue in Silver Lake. She partnered with them. We were, yeah. So I love that place. And so she was able to get some support from them and started recruiting bands. And then I started recruiting all of the female musicians that I had come into contact with, in a short amount of time. And so we ended up creating this like machine of women who were just, all about having a space and stuff. So it's really cool. So we did that for, we had one a month. We had January, February, and March, and then shutdown happened. Which was a huge bummer. We're like, we got this thing, it's gaining momentum, it's really building, and we're starting to get more and more interest. We had let's see, Eva Gardner from Pink had performed. We've had Grammy nominated performers come in. We've had all of these really diverse women coming in with their different successful backgrounds and playing. And so we were like devastated when everything shut down. So what we have adapted, Shira she's not the kind of person to like, just like, okay, well, that's it. That's, we're done. As I told you from Warped Tour, she just like showed up with her van. So she's all about like, okay, we're going to figure something else out. So, we started doing live streams, every Tuesday night. We would have different live streams, and we would have artists just jump on their Instagram and we would bring them in and we'd have them play a couple songs. We'd talk with them, and then we would just repeat that every Tuesday. And so now that was actually working out really well for us. And so I came to them and said, what if we did, since all of the tours are like on hold.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, what if we had, since now we can have artists from different cities, I'm like, what if we just did like a virtual tour? What if we had like, 1 week we'll do like New York, and then the next week we can do Atlanta, and then the next week we can do Chicago or whatever, and we can bring in artists that we otherwise wouldn't have if we were still doing a live event. We wouldn't be able to have them on. So for us to be able to do that, we were like, yeah, absolutely, let's do this. So, and her and Jules Quas, who is also on the Gritty and Pink team, the two of them really took it and ran with it. And, they booked like, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 artists in the span of 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm like so impressed with them. They did so much amazing work in such a short amount of time. And so, so we got all these artists to perform, and we're about 4 weeks in, I want to say. The next one is going to be this Tuesday. It's going to be Chicago as my city. And so it's really cool because now I get to help some of my friends back in Chicago have a platform during this incredibly difficult time. So so it's cool. It's, you know, the ability for Gritty in Pink to have adapted for so long in such a way during this crisis has been, you know, something that I'm extremely proud of and proud to be a part of. I guess my role for that has been, you know, when we were doing live events, I was the person I was assigning musicians to their songs. We would pick out songs and then I would help them, like, okay, I know you're a metal guitarist, so we're going to put you on this Hailstorm song, and I know are a killer drummer, so we're going to put you on this song, and kind of organizing that. So I kind of took a step back after we went virtual, and I'm just now starting to kind of get more involved in it and, you know, helping out with the booking process and recruiting and playing songs, because Shira still performs on these live streams. So it always starts with Shira, and then, you know, so yeah, it's growing very quickly. It's super exciting. I think the future of it is, you know, eventually we're going to be like a completely, you know, almost like LinkedIn, but for like female musicians or female, you know, entertainers, people in the music industry, you know, to really give them a space to, you know, be heard, cut their teeth, and connect with one another. So
that's super cool. I love stuff like that. It's like kind of one of the reoccurring themes on this show is just that DIY spirit. Just like if something needs to get done, get to getting it done. And you don't have to wait for permission, and you don't have to, nobody has to say, okay, like you could just do whatever it is that you want to do. And so that is totally in the spirit of how I see the world. That, you know, I was raised in the 80s, you know, hardcore punk scene. And so that's just, you know, my entire life, you know, being from the time I was 14, like that's just how I was taught to see the world. And, you know, it's been something that's always stayed with me. And so whenever I see it, I love it. I love that stuff. Is there a website where people can go and check out all that stuff and figure out where the live streams are and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website it's brand new. It's www.grittyinpink.co. And the Instagram handle is just Gritty in Pink Life, at Gritty in Pink Life. And yeah, we have live streams and stuff. Right now, we're actually doing, this is really huge for guitar players out there. We're doing a Fender giveaway. We were able to get Fender to back us up. And so we're giving away a Player Series guitar and a Player Series bass on August, I believe it's August 4th. Whatever our Austin show is, I'm sure we'll definitely, I can get you that information. But yeah, so we do giveaways, you know, we have sponsors, we have, you know, a lot of support from, you know, LA and, you know, partners that we've made throughout the rest of the country from this tour. So yeah, so it's super exciting. I'm very, very proud of how far it's come in, you know, just a few short months. So.
That's totally cool. Even cooler that you're getting like brand endorsements to help you, you know, do giveaways and help promote. That's always a sure sign that you've got something going on, because, you know, brands like that, you know, in order for them to be like, well, we'll give people stuff, they've got to have enough eyeballs to make it worth their time to do it. So
there's got to be a return on investment for them, for sure. So.
It's a bummer that it started up so quick before the quarantine stuff. And I don't know if I'm bumming you out or if you already did or didn't know this, but apparently I just read that the satellite's not going to be able to come back.
I did hear that. Yeah, we were heartbroken. We were definitely heartbroken because, you know, they were so good to us. You know, they took us in and they let us, you know, have this space, and they were very, very supportive. And so, likewise, you know, we were devastated. We were heartbroken, but at that time we weren't really all that surprised. We knew that, you know, you got to do what you got to do. You know, there's never been a crisis quite like this before. So yeah, we knew. And so one of the things that you know, Shira and I had talked about prior to, or when this had happened, was, hey, how do we make sure that the women in the community know that, you know, we're still going to continue. So we made a statement saying like, hey, listen, The satellite is, they got to do what we got to do. We're grateful for everything that they did for us. But that's not going to hinder us in any way. That's not going to slow us down. So as soon as live music returns, we're going to take charge. We'll find, another venue. We'll find another space. And we're going to keep doing what it is that we do. So we've come too far to let that be a setback, so.
Yeah. And it's like one of those things, like you're still able to build the brand doing your live streams. So when things do come back online in real life, some venues are going to be like, I bet you guys get offers from more than one, because like it's such a cool idea. And and like you're going to have a brand at the end of this that is going to be able to draw people. Because once people can go back out, people are going to go back out a lot.
Yeah.
I think you guys will find yourself in a pretty good spot. I think a lot of venues, even though they're struggling and some of them won't make it through, I think once this is all done, whoever's left standing is going to have a few good months right in a row.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely on board with that. I'm in agreement. Like, as soon as I can, like I want to go with, making sure that everything is still safe and that it's, I'm not putting any employees at risk. But as soon as, we have like a vaccine or we have some way to really combat this, I want to, go out there and support these venues as much as possible. I think a lot of people feel that way too, probably.
Yeah, for sure. Me and Alex figured out right before we came on that we're neighbors, and one of the things that I'm hoping, we don't have a good punk venue out here in this part of the Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley, other than like the Corbin Bowl has punk rock bowling. I have the LA Gutter Punks bowling, and then they have shows at the Corbin Bowl. But it'd be nice if we could get something out here, because it can be a hassle to drive down into LA, and it's not like you can Uber down there. It's just not feasible financially to do so. But so I'm hoping that some kind of good, like, underground alternative music venue can pop up out here when the opportunity arises, because there's gonna be a lot of empty spaces that are going to be available to be filled with things. So
yeah, absolutely. I have, when I first moved out here, I moved to the Valley, and that is largely because of the fact that my office is based in Thousand Oaks. And so I wanted something that was like, still close to everything in LA, but still, not crazy far out of the way that I'm, having an already more difficult commute than than LA traffic is going to give me. So I love the Valley. I've lived here for 5 years, and yes, it's hot. But you get used to it, and it's just so cool. I think there's so much potential out here. There's all kinds of hidden gems already. And I think that, and I'm seeing, I don't know about you, but I'm noticing a lot more and more of my friends are starting to, because of how expensive things are getting, people are coming to the Valley. So I'm like, cool, let's bring some cool shit out here too. Like let's make some cool stuff out here.
Yeah. So. We, my kids are like your age, so I'm a little bit older than you are, but when I moved to LA, I lived down like mid-city farmers market area, and which is now the Grove. The Grove didn't even exist 25 years ago when I moved to LA. And then when they got to be like started to get into like junior high age, I was like, I don't want them going to high school down in the LA basin. So we moved out to the Woodland Hills, West Hills area, and they got to go to, one of the best high schools in LA. And I came out here to the Valley in like 2000, and then after me and their mother split, I moved down to Echo Park, and I was in Echo Park for like 8 or 9 years, like almost across the street from the Echo. And so I got spoiled. I got super spoiled. And then when me and my wife decided to buy a house, it was like, well, you can always afford to buy something out here in the West Valley. So we came out here, and like 2 of my 3 kids are out here. So, and they're like into punk rock and stuff too. So it's cool to have, to be back
that means you
close
raised them right.
I did. I always say, like a lot of families raise their children on the Beatles, and I raised my family on the Misfits. It's like, that is like the family's favorite band.
I love it. Love it so much.
So that I absolutely love that you run a music program through your day job, and I love that you run this music program in your free time. I mean, it just doesn't get much cooler than that for me. I like people who bring something to the scene, and I think that's super cool that you do that. So you also are in a few different bands. What are the bands you're in? I think you mentioned, what is it, shiragirl?
Yeah. So shiragirl, I play bass for her. And then, when I do have free time during all of this, I play in, so I also play guitar for an up and coming indie pop singer. Her name is Madeline Rosine. And she's already got like a pretty, big international following and stuff. And the reason why I wanted to work with her, much like you and your kids, like I was raised on like punk rock, I got my first Green Day record. I got Dookie when I was 13. And then that just, I just went down this rabbit hole of Rancid and Minor Threat and Misfits and all that. So I always pictured myself as like being traditionally more of like a punk rock guitarist, punk rock bass player. But I ended up, going to school. I studied classical guitar in college. I studied bass, jazz bass. I really tried to get as much, different style in as possible. What really kind of attracted me to Madeline and her music is that, she has the music itself is actually very, it's very, pretty. There are very beautiful melodies and harmonies and stuff happening. And, it's got kind of this like vintage aesthetic to it, this like jazzy sort of aesthetic. But the lyrics themselves, if you listen, are like, they can be, very blunt, very honest, very dark. Like there's no like, masking it or trying to, I feel like I see a lot of pop artists who try to have lyrics and content that they think is more palatable. And it ends up coming off like, unauthentic or just very generic. I think her music, her album is called Raised on Porn. And so she's got a whole song that kind of talks about how, from an early age, kids and we're kind of programmed to kind of see ourselves a certain way or to like, try to appease the opposite sex. And it's like almost mocking that in a way. The songs that she writes are, I think musically, they're very smart. They're very fun. And then, but the lyrics themselves have like almost a punk rock sort of vibe to them. It's like that. It's that same essence. It's that same vibe. So I was very drawn to that. It's like, okay, I get to bring the best of both worlds into that. I get to bring this like, fuck the man mentality, but also like I can play major 7 chords. So it's this beautiful balance. So I love that. And then I actually play in the midst of all this too. So my husband, Patrick, he has a group called Patrick Windsor and the Black Male House, which is like a very spooky reference. I was like, I don't know if a lot of people are going to get that, but it's actually it's a pretty dark reference. And so he and I, so how we met, if I can go back that far, he was the manager in the Guitar Center that I ended up transferring to run the lessons program way back in Chicago. So we ended up becoming really good friends through that. And we had both talked about wanting to move to LA. And then, we started dating. And then I got the opportunity and I was like, come on, we're going to move to LA. Like, let's do this. So he moved out here with me. We got married in 2017. And, we both work in the industry. He works for Guild Guitars. He's an inside sales manager there. And he also is, we're very similar in that he is also, comes from this like, very rock and roll background, but also has studied jazz extensively and has like a deep appreciation for like the Beach Boys and the Beatles and stuff.
The Beach Boys are one of my favorites. My dad was a huge Beach Boys fan. And so, that I get that.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Because that's, I never really got into them until we started, until we got together because, at the time I was like, all about, I'm rock and roll. Like, I don't really listen to the lighter stuff. But then,
Right.
the older I get, the more of an appreciation you have for like the beauty
Sure.
that is pet sounds, right? So like,
Right, of course.
so the best way to describe the music that he writes and his sound is it's like dark Beach Boys.
Oh,
It's
all right.
yeah, it's like spooky. It's like
I'm interested.
right, yeah. So it's like spooky power pop, if that's how I'd have to describe it. And it's like all very, it's got a lot of horn lines and it's got very intelligent chord progressions and stuff. But it's like he had a single that was about burning witches. So so he writes pretty much everything. And he's incredibly talented. Like, I love him, I hate him. You know what I mean? Like, I love him, but I'm also like jealous of like how he's able to like get this to come out of him. But
that's a real thing for us creatives. It's that weird thing of it's that weird thing of like being insanely in love with something and then like hating it at the same time because it makes you feel a way about what you make. It happens to us visual artists quite a lot where you see something that somebody's done and you're like, oh, that's so good. It sucks.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I'm like mad that I didn't think of this first, or that
Exactly.
So there's a lot of that going on in our relationship. I'm like, I love him and I hate him at the same time. But I play bass for him, and it's super fun to get to flesh out these ideas that he has. We haven't played a show. It's still very, we just got the entire band, the lineup figured out. Right before the shutdown, we had our very first show booked May 15th, and then it was like completely shut down. So,
God damn it. Where were you guys going to play?
We were going to play Universal Bar and Grill.
Oh, okay.
So that was going to be our very first show, and unfortunately it didn't happen. But in the meantime, he's been a very good sport about it. He's still writing. He released another EP. I'll definitely send you links and stuff to his music after this.
Sure. I want to check it out.
It's so good. He's so talented. So I get like a healthy mix, I think, of sound when I'm playing out. I got my punk band shiragirl. I've got this like indie pop sort of thing with Madeline, and then I have like my spooky Beach Boys with Patrick Windsor at the Blackmail House. So yeah, that's
cool. I don't know. How do you have any time to do anything with all that? Although right now everybody's got nothing but time. But
exactly.
When this all opens back up, I'll be thinking of you and like the lack of sleep you'll be getting trying to get everything done that you've set up for yourself.
But I'm dead. It's fine. It'll be fine.
That's exactly the motto, right?
Yeah.
There's always time to get something else done before the end.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like, yeah, I definitely want to check out your husband's band for sure. And I am familiar with shiragirl just by name. I don't think I've ever heard any of the music. So I'm intrigued on that for sure.
Yeah. Her on that note, so we just celebrated the 1 year anniversary of her last album, which I unfortunately did not get to play on. But it was produced by she's very good friends with Tim Armstrong. And so he produced that album for her. And we're looking at, hopefully when it's safe to record again, we're all writing new material now. And so hopefully, he said he would help us out again and produce for us in the next record. So hopefully.
That's awesome. I did all of Rancid's tour shirts for last summer. And then I had like 3 designs in submission for this coming up summer before all the tours got canceled. So I'm sitting on like 3 Rancid tour shirts right now that I don't know if they'll ever see the light of day or what's going to happen with them. But
it's awesome.
Yeah, I like go all the way back with that band to like even like my old band in the 80s used to we played some shows with Operation Ivy up in the Bay Area. I'm originally from the San Francisco area.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I go all the way back with those dudes. And then Lars Fredrickson is from my actual friend group in San Jose where I grew up. He was a little bit behind me, so it was like when I was when I was first getting into it, I was always kind of the youngest kid at all the parties and shows. And then as I got older, their younger kids came in, and Lars was like in that group right behind me by a few years. But yeah, so yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of like ska punk all that much. There's not a lot of it that I really like a lot, but you know, it's like one of those things that when you latch onto a band early enough on, you'll go with them on the ride sometimes. Because like the first couple of records were just straight, you know, punk records, and then, you know, Out Come the Wolves, they started adding a little bit more of that Operation Ivy sound. But yeah, I'm like a huge fan. Got to see him on the big stage last year at Punk Rock Bowling, and they absolutely destroyed. It was like super awesome, like, because I hadn't seen him. I don't think I'd seen them live since the 90s, you know? Wow. And so it was like cool to get to see them again, like on a massive level like that, and just be like, damn, you figured it out. You cracked the code, you know?
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and Out Come the Wolves is, you know, I put that in one of my top favorite records of all time. And sure. A lot of that has to do with Matt Freeman's bass playing. Because
He's one of the if he's not the best punk rock bass player of all time, he got to be in the argument.
Absolutely. Like because when I first started playing bass, I was a guitar player originally, and I still, like I said, I still play guitar in a couple projects, but I switched over to bass. Like many bass players, you know, hey man, we need a bass player. You think you could learn this for me? So I ended up getting involved that way, you know, because I just wanted to play. I wanted to, you know, have that experience. So I got into bass playing, and I wasn't all that stoked on it until I really went back and started listening to And Out Come the Wolves. And like, oh my gosh, the bass playing on that album is like, I think it's one of the most underrated bass albums of all time. Like, it's so good. So I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. He just like all those runs he does and stuff, like during quarantine, he's been like just like doing little like Instagram videos and stuff of like him playing along to stuff. God, he rips so hard. It's like, I love that dude. I love that band, and I love that dude. And I kind of like everything that all of them do separately as well. Like, I'm a fan of Tim's art, and I'm a fan of Tim's solo stuff, and I'm a fan of Lars Fredriksson and the Bastards, and I'm, you know, like everything all those dudes do. And that, you know, that, you know, they're obviously a huge, you know, part of my music intake. So like I always say, like I always get a cheat sheet from everybody, and I didn't want to get too far into yours, because I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to learn the things that you got going on.
Yeah, totally.
From you. In your own words, because one of the things I struggle with is with this show is figuring out how to introduce people and what they do, because I don't want to pigeonhole anybody. Like, the worst thing is like some fucking other person being like punk rock guitar player, and it's like, no, I'm not necessarily just that. You know what I mean? Like, I have all different types of people who do all different types of things, and so it was nice to be able to have you tell me in your own words what it is that you got going on. And I think that that worked out really well.
Good. I'm glad.
But in your notes of other things you like, you put down that you're a horror fan, which I think a lot of people in, you know, like punk, metal, hardcore type of stuff, I think that's a common thing for a lot of us. Are you more of a vintage horror fan, or more of a more modern horror fan, or kind of do you go either way?
I go back and forth, man. I'm a huge horror nerd. I would say that, you know, my favorite horror movie of all time is The Exorcist. You know, so I love the old
it's really the only one that's truly scary. You know, it's like so terrifying movie.
Like, you know, and I had grown up, because my parents are also big horror fans. So I had grown up, you know, seeing a lot of horror movies, but I was an adult when I saw The Exorcist, and it still scared the shit out of me. Like, you know, and it holds up, you know, even though
it does.
CGI and, you know, cinematography have gotten a lot better. Like, there's still something eerie when you hear that theme come in. It's so spooky. So yeah, I'm a big horror buff. I typically prefer, like, you know, I love all aspects of horror. I love the Evil Dead franchise. I love like ridiculous horror. But I also am like just obsessed with like the classic monsters, and like the Universal, the old school like Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy and stuff. Like, so I'm all over the place when it comes to horror. I actually got to, I almost forgot about this part. So I got the opportunity to play bass on a movie score called Vampire Dad. And it is a very cheesy, campy, like it's supposed to be this like over the top, like B horror movie. That at the time, this was a couple years ago, I was playing in a band called the Voodoo Surfers, and we were like a horror themed surf band. And so like it was surf, but it was like,
I definitely want to go and listen to that, because I absolutely love that stuff, like Ghastly Ones and all that. Like horror surf music is like, if you walk into my art studio in here on any given day, you're as likely to hear surf music as you are any other type of music. And I love that the little subgenre with the horror aspect. So I'm going to double make sure to check out any links you have to that stuff, because that's right up my alley for sure.
Yeah. So we're not still playing anymore because, you know, we've kind of gone into some different side projects, but yeah, you know, we were very heavily influenced by the Ghastly Ones and Satan's Pilgrims and Messer Chups and like all of those like horror surf groups. And so we got the opportunity, the drummer in our band, his day job is that he is a movie editor, and he got involved in this side indie project that was set. It was supposed to be, it's a vampire movie that takes place in the 50s, and it's supposed to be really cheesy and campy and kind of have that like, you know, ultra goofy kind of spookiness to it. And he was able to convince them to let us play the original soundtrack for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so it was shelved for a while. We did it. We recorded all the parts, and it was super cool, super fun experience. And then it just kind of, everything got put on hold for a little while. I think the ownership of the movie kind of changed hands a couple times. And then we got a notification back in May that, oh, by the way, we've decided we finished the movie. We've decided we're going to release it, and here it is. So didn't get to have like a big premiere or anything, but it did come out on like Amazon and iTunes and stuff. So that to me was like so cool. I was just like,
that's super awesome.
Yeah, you know, like as a, you know, not just as a musician, like be excited to be on a soundtrack and to be able to hear, you know, my playing on a movie, but like specifically this sort of like vintage, spooky, cheesy horror movie, like that to me was just like cloud nine.
That's available on Amazon Prime?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Amazon Prime.
I might watch it tonight, actually.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's I think a lot of people, the reviews on it are interesting, because I think a lot of people didn't realize, they're like, oh, it's over the top, it's like, you know, cheesy, and it's like that's the point. Like if you're a real like, you know, horror fan and you love like all aspects of like that ultra cheesy horror, like that was the idea. That's what they were going for. So yeah, definitely watch it. Let me know what you think.
For sure. It's funny. I tried to get this podcast going this time last year, and then I got a big contract for my painting art. I work for a toy company.
Oh, awesome.
And so I kind of got sidetracked all throughout the year with that, and I wasn't able to get this thing off the ground. And then when the quarantine happened, I was like, well, this is a perfect time. This is the perfect time for me to start doing this show. And so in order to force myself to learn how to record properly, audio and video, edit things and do all that, I decided to have my friends on my Facebook page recommend movies for me to watch and review. And then I did these, you know, little movie reviews. All of them are still available on my YouTube channel. But one of the ones that I got that was a movie that I had always ignored was, and it's one of those over the top, is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil.
Yes.
Which I'd been seeing it forever on Netflix. And for some reason I was like, it seemed like it was like a Larry the Cable Guy movie or something. And so I was like, I'm not particularly interested in that. And then I actually went and watched it, and that movie is absolutely hilarious. And it was so well done yeah, so I totally get it. And I totally get that. And it's like, you know, Evil Dead, there's a long tradition of that in horror. And I when I was a teenager growing up, like the Nightmare on Elm Street films were, like I think the first one came out when I was like 12 or 13 or 14, something like that. And so those were definitely my favorite during the 80s. And then, after the second or third one, they basically became the same thing,
Right.
They just took that whole like almost comedic over the top. So it sounds like that's a movie that I will actually like very much.
Awesome. Yeah.
But I also do like, well, what I've found is I like pretty much any movie that A24 makes, but that production company.
Yes.
But the one because I spent a long time kind of not watching a lot of horror movies, a lot of newer horror movies. I was kind of one of those people stuck in watching the ones that I liked. But I watched that movie, The Witch, and was just blown away. I was like, damn, this is really good. And then, from there, I've been trying to watch more newer horror, like The Void and things like that. And so, old guy trying to get into the newer style of horror stuff. Cause it's such a different vibe, which it should be. Every generation's art should have its own voice. But yeah, I'm like actually enjoying, getting into some new indie horror stuff too.
That's awesome. I love The Witch. Obsessed with The Witch. It's so good. You can't see it obviously because of the way the camera's facing, but right above where my computer is, we have a giant poster of Black Phillip.
If you take a picture of it, I'll pop it up so YouTube people can see it.
Perfect. Okay, I will do that. Yeah, so we have that where my husband and I are both obsessed with it. Creepiest soundtrack I think that's come out in the last 30 years or so. So I love that. I definitely find myself there's this new wave, I think, of horror that's kind of come out, like new horror directors. And I think that, The Witch, I know he also did The Lighthouse, which is like, I saw that.
I still need to watch that.
It's very creepy. It's very like, I don't know. It's not like, jump scare kind of creepy.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Neither is The Witch.
Yeah.
Which is great about it. It seemed like you were watching real life, which makes anything scarier, right?
Exactly. And the other one that came out recently that in one of my top movies of all time would probably be Midsummer. I don't know if you've seen that.
That's still on the list. My wife is she does hair styling for films and TV, and so we get Oscar screeners every December, January. We just get like copies of every single movie that came out. And we have all of these movies just sitting in like our stack of Oscar screeners. And, there's so many that, trying to pick which one you're going to watch. Sometimes it's hard, but I need to watch It Part 2 because I have that. I need to watch, because I was very happy about it. I think there was a lot of people who didn't necessarily like
the remake.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved it. But my love for Stephen King is well documented on this show. There's like 3 episodes dedicated to Stephen King stuff, and the guy I've had on for that is going to be a regular Stephen King guest that we just talk about Stephen King stuff. So,
yes.
So I'm either it's got to be so bad a version of a Stephen King thing that I can't like it, or I'm probably gonna give it some leeway and try to find a way to like it. Anyway, I need to watch It too. I need to watch The Lighthouse very, very much because I like everybody who's in it and I love that director. And I need to watch Midsummer, and I also need to watch Hereditary, which is on the short list also.
Yes,
because everybody's like, that's like the best horror movie in forever, and so those are 4 that I need to get out of the way.
Yeah, and again, they share The Witch and The Lighthouse have a director, and then Midsummer and Hereditary have the same director. So it's like there's this new, wave of horror directors that are coming out, which is so exciting. I'm really excited to see where they go. The funny thing that when you bring up Stephen King, and so I just watched, also love Stephen King, loved the new It movies, thought they were spectacular. We just watched. I think it was 2 days ago, we just watched Christine for the first time. The car movie.
You've never seen that?
I had never seen Christine.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, that's a good one. That was one of the good ones from the 80s. They don't mean to interrupt, but he became such a huge phenomenon in the 80s that they just like started making everything he had available, and there was not always a lot of quality control around the script versions of his movies. So it was either the best thing you ever saw, like Christine, or just some weird movie that didn't make sense, like Cujo. Like Cujo is a great short story, but that's not a good full format movie. I mean, it's just kind of a ripoff of Jaws anyway, but yeah, so it was like weird like that. And then like, you know, like Maximum Overdrive. I don't know if you've seen Maximum Overdrive, but it's one of my favorite stories of his. And even though it is an abomination of his story, and he even wrote the screenplay and directed it, and it still came out fucking terrible. I will watch that movie every single time it is on.
Right.
Because it's just so ridiculous. Yeah. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
you were saying you watched Christine.
You're good. So we were watching it, and my husband had pointed out, and I don't think I've ever agreed with anything more. He'd pointed out, it's like, man, like Stephen King's brain is just like, you know, on the one hand, you have these like masterpieces, you know, you like Carrie and Shawshank Redemption and like all this stuff that he does that's Green Mile, like all this shit that's incredible. And then on the other hand, like he can take, you know, this like come up with these brilliant stories and make these brilliant movies and write these amazing books. And then he can also go like, what about a fucking car that kills people? Like, what about an evil car? And like he'll just run with that. And it's like, he's got such extremes of like, hey, this is like super, you know, there's a lot of metaphors, and like the horror factor is just brilliant, and it really just speaks to you on many levels. And then you have just this like absurd like car that just, you know, kills people. And it's right. And I was like, you're totally right. Like, it's just this awesome, like, you don't know what you're going to get. You're either going to get something that's like crazy and or something that's just, you know, incredible. And then you're going to have like this absolute crazy shit happening over here. So I loved it. I thought, as far as like 80s horror movies goes, I'm so glad I watched it. It was so much fun.
Yeah. They actually took the time to kind of make that a little bit more of a serious, almost like high school drama, which really it did it a great service. And like, you know, just like the effects were cool. The car coming back from being demolished was really well done. And yeah, that movie is super, super solid. And then, yeah, like to like what you were saying, like, you know, it's like Maximum Overdrive. It's like, what if all of the vehicles of the world got a mind of their own because a flying saucer flew over Earth, or a comet flew over Earth, and it became sentient, and then like all the trucks decided to try to kill all the people.
Exactly.
And it's like the funny thing about Maximum Overdrive, though, and the reason why it ended up being such an absurd mess was, and this is admitted by Stephen King, was that he was in the full depths of his cocaine addiction, and so he just he wasn't going to listen to anybody. He was just going to do whatever he wanted. And shit just went off the rails. He was
just going to write about fucking whatever.
Right.
Mind. Yeah. And I was going to say, like, that makes absolute total sense. I'm not surprised
Totally.
that was drug fueled at all whatsoever. Makes total sense.
Right. Yeah. I was very fortunate that my parents were like insane avid readers, like, and they are to this day. Like my parents, for all of my life, both of them are constantly reading a book. As soon as they're done with one, they're starting another. And that's what they do. That's what they've always done with their time, is read constantly. And my dad reads a lot of different people, but Stephen King is his favorite. And so those books were just always around when I was like 10 or 11 years old. And me being such a massive horror fan, my dad was like, you know, he trusted me that if they were too heavy, I would stop. Because I was always really good about that, self-regulating as a kid. Like if I was tired, I would go to bed. It didn't really matter what time it was. So my parents didn't really have a bedtime for me, like
right
on like the weekends. And so there was like, you know, it was like a show on in the Bay Area in the 70s and 80s called Creature Feature, and they showed 2 horror movies every Friday, Saturday night. My dad was always like, yeah, stay up and watch them. He didn't care because he knew if it was too scary, I'd go to bed or turn it off, or if I got tired, I'd just go to bed. So my parents were really free with like, you can read whatever you want. We trust that if it's too much, you'll put it down. And so I started reading Stephen King books when I was like 10 or 11 years old, like The Shining and, It. And, and so my dad being a constant reader, every time a new book came out, I was like, I just would, as soon as he was done, I would read it. And to this very moment, that really the only books I own are Stephen King books or, books on serial killers, like true crime serial killer books.
Yes.
I have to admit, in my old age, to have losing quite a bit of my taste for reading true crime serial killer books, because when I was younger, it was like there was some kind of disconnect about. I knew it was real, but there was a disconnect. And now, as an adult, I'm like, the realization that that really happened, and it's kind of terrible. It's not, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
But I also, I love it from the history standpoint, and I'm extremely interested in the phenomenon of why it doesn't really happen anymore. It seems to have disappeared as a thing that happens in American culture on any kind of large scale. Of course, there's still, the odd one here or there, but mostly things are mass killings now, and they're not serial killings. And I think that is an interesting phenomenon to me. Like, where did they all go? Why did
exactly.
that stop?
Did everybody suddenly just like, you don't have that, psychological problem anymore? No, I totally agree. I find it fascinating, and true crime fascinating from like from a historical perspective, from like a psychological perspective. I'm more interested in like, events that maybe led to that part.
Sure.
There's a really good documentary out. I'll send you the name of it once I remember. But it's about Ted Bundy, but it's from the perspective of the women that he had relationships with, and then the families of the victims, and kind of how.
Yeah, I think I've watched that.
Have you? Okay, yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. I think that a lot of it is probably like why we don't see it as much anymore. At least this is my theory. It's a lot. Everybody's got cell phones on them now. Everybody knows where everybody else is at all times, right? So as soon as like, somebody's not responding to a text or a phone call or whatever, it's an immediate red flag, right? So sure. I think that, and DNA testing has obviously come a long way, and it's much, much easier now to track down criminals. And so I think that, they either are, finding a healthier outlet for their bizarre aggression, or I don't know, or maybe they're just, getting more creative. Who knows? But yeah, it's very interesting, because it did, like, as soon as it was like you had this like mass number of serial killers between like the 60s and the 80s, and then it just kind of, you don't hear about it as much anymore. So
yeah, I'm a huge fan of the podcast, The Last Podcast on the Left, and which is pretty much primarily serial killers and cults and UFOs, stuff like that. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the show, but there is a theory that they bring up that is a legitimate theory about what happened there, was that the drop in crime all over the world, and in particular the United States, and the drop in serial killers coincided with removing lead from gasoline, and that the pollution in the air for 40 years from cars all had lead in the gas. So all of the pollution, we were breathing lead all the time, and that one of the symptoms of lead poisoning is this type of behavior. And then the other part of that theory, a coinciding theory, is that there was a generation of kids who were like my parents' age, who were raised right after World War II. And the men who came back from that war, there was no mental health help for them. And so there was like this entire generation of American men who were shattered from what they went through in the war. And they came home and they didn't have any outlet for that. And so there was a lot of, there was a culture of a substance abuse and for self-medicating and, domestic abuse because there was no way for these people to get any help for what they'd gone through in the war. And so there was a lot of kids who grew up in those circumstances, and almost all of the serial killers that you see fit into households that were that way. And, and then, right. All the standard stuff, profiling the FBI, the Mindhunter guys did, where they started figuring out like people who had head trauma, people who had, particular domineering parent in either direction. There's a lot of science. There's a lot of science that went into figuring out. And so I think there's a combination of all the things we just talked about that probably make it that there's way less of that going on. But now people just
right.
like walk into some place with a gun and shoot like 40 people,
Right.
Instead of doing it one at a time. Instead of doing it one at a time, they do it all at once.
Exactly. Right. No, I didn't know that, about, the gasoline, but the fact that lines up with
the lead poisoning theory is a legit theory.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah. That's crazy. So yeah, it's probably a combination, like you said, of all of those things that are happening, the psychological aspect, the
cell phone's
environmental
a huge
aspect.
thing. That's like a huge thing. Like nobody gets away with anything anymore. If you're doing something in public, someone's going to film you doing it.
Right.
Well, not only cell phone cameras, but just like household cameras, like everybody's house has like I have video cameras on the front of my house. Like nobody comes up to the front of my house that I don't see and know who's there. Like you can't, shit doesn't work the way it used to, Nobody leaves their windows unlocked. Right. Nobody leaves their doors unlocked. Like none of that stuff happens anymore, in reference to that, we're in the middle of watching I'll Be Gone in the Shadows, which is about the Golden State serial killer, the HBO series. I mean, we're like right in the middle of that. And so, yeah, that's kind of interesting that they caught that guy through like, Ancestry or 23andMe DNA samples, which when I saw that he'd been found that way, I was like back when it happened in real life, I was like, I don't have anything to hide from anybody, but that's exactly why I would never do one of those DNA test things. I don't need some private corporation having my DNA on file. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
Something doesn't seem right about that. And then, you find out that all of those DNA sampling companies were, a law was put into place that allows them to sell that. And so now they can sell your DNA data to pharmaceutical companies and all these. And I was like, I'm glad I never did that because, it's like, again, I'm not a paranoid person, but that seems like common sense to me.
Yikes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely get the appeal of, wanting to know more about, like, I don't know anything about like where my family came from. I'm guessing Europe. I just have a feeling there's a lot of Europe here. Yeah, I've always wanted to know more, and the health aspect, because it can tell you like different diseases that you're prone to or whatnot, and things to look out for. So like I get that. That's very interesting. But again, like you said, there's that whole like having your DNA on file is bizarre. So I'm like I'm gonna wait this out and just see what happens. See if there's any crazy like cloning process that comes to light or whatnot, and then go from there. So I just want to give it time, let it be out in the market for a while. So because I've seen, like you said, I've seen way too many horror movies. I know exactly how this can go south very quickly.
Totally. You know what? I've really enjoyed sitting and talking to you and getting to know you, and your story and what you got going on. You're a super nice, super cool person. When the world opens back up and we start having people back to the house for barbecues, you and your husband will be on the list of people to come and hang out. You. We're always trying to add new fun and cool people to our circle of friends. But yeah, I appreciate you giving me your time and coming on. Is there anything else you want to shout out before we go?
I don't think so. I feel like I covered a lot.
Yeah, we did. It
But
was
yeah, I
awesome.
just thank you so much for having me
Of
on
course.
here. It was, like you said, super fun. It's super cool I feel like I always have like a group of friends that I have one group of friends that I can talk music with, and then I have another group that I can like talk horror with. So it's nice to have, to be able to cover both of those things since I'm very passionate about both. So
Sure.
thanks for having me on. No,
Yeah,
I
of
appreciate
course.
it.
Of course.
Cool.
Well, we'll talk again soon for sure.
Awesome. Sounds good.